But you know, Western are very special. It's possible.
Did you listen to the Hot Breakfast this morning? Here's what you missed.
Kenya Kwanza's biggest problem has been strategic communication. Kenya Kwanza's biggest problem has been that they have not moved from what I call campaign communication. They are still going out. They're very reactionary. As in, once you're government, you get into Stratcom where you set the agenda. Ensure that Nick next week will talk about this, and he will not miss it. He will have to talk about it. But I think the office of the spokesperson is also late in the day. And there's a lot of guys talking at each other. There's Moses Kuria on the other side saying this, and then there's the other side, Rigiji saying this, and MPs on the other side pulling differently, Osoro not helping the situation. So their biggest problem is not that they've not been able to deliver. Things are difficult, yes. Not that they were going to be any easy. By the way, if I've looked at whatever William Ruto said, he never said it was going to be easy. All of us knew, if you look at newspapers 5 years ago, 3 years ago, they said we were getting to where we are today. At least we are not surprised that we are here, and I'd be surprised that we are surprised that we are here.
No, but you see, now you're starting to talk like an aspiring MP, just trying to politician. You're just putting the icing on the cake. You see, what happens is, a good leader knows that my people need to, for example, we need to be able to run businesses, so we pay taxes. Kids need to be able to go to school at the right cost, so that I have more money to spend, more money to invest. And that's common sense. I mean, even if things go up in price gradually, then, we adjust like that. But you can't move from 170 to 217, and then I'm sure next week will go up by another 20 bob. How do people go to school? How do we get to work? You see, now our spending power goes down. And there's no way you can say that there's nothing he can do. This is a person who earns 2 million. What the CSS are like 1.5 plus per DM. So these adjustments will never really affect them. But now the Mwananchi who's got a new baby coming in, a new kid going to school, and your income does not increase. You have to shut down your business. Because there's more taxes and less profit. It's like you're working just for taxes. How do you justify that? Now, I don't know if you're going to switch to MP mode or now to be a normal human being.
First of all, we were just laying the background on why we are here. It's also very unfair to actually discuss today without considering how today came to be. Yesterday was just as important if we're going to talk about today, because whoever doesn't know where he's come from definitely doesn't know where he is, and cannot lie to you that he knows where he's going. The Kenya Kwanza administration, of course, promised prudent fiscal management of resources to ensure that we get as much value for being around here. The first liberation, of course, was to get out the Mzungu, Mau Mau thing. The second liberation started immediately after independence. We realized that independence is not enough. So, of course, all the noise that you see from 1967 coming all the way to 2002 is the struggle for the second liberation, and that was about good governance. We have got a constitution to show for that. The third and the final liberation, in my opinion, and that is what cannot change, is what is in Article 43 of the Constitution, socioeconomic empowerment. Having independence, being in a country with a progressive constitution is not sufficient. I actually need to see that reflected in my pocket. And that is what William Ruto promised. But then, even as he promised that, was he going to come up with an economy of his own, a country of his own? A country is a going concern. It's perpetual. We have got a seal. It doesn't change. If Jeff becomes president tomorrow, he will not come up with a new Kenya and with new citizens and everything else. So, can we talk about the background against which he's actually dealing today? And by the way, it doesn't matter whether it was William Ruto or Raila Odinga who would have become president. The fifth watch was going to be very difficult. We saw this coming. And by the way, I think you guys sit here, and this is the most masculine studio I've been in for a very long time. It's a serious manel from back and front. So, you see, we get to a place where you're looking at the 10 years that we've gone through. We've spoken about this. We cannot pretend that, Nick, I tell you, okay, this is let me use this, allow me to use this. I'm hoping I'll not market a product without those guys paying. But I'm just saying, I'm giving you my Fuliza account. But I have Fuliza'd to the maximum. So it is in your name, Nick. You have got a Fuliza limit of, let's say, 20,000 shillings. But I did Fuliza everything else, and I'm giving it to you. So first of all, you have to jaza your shimo, and then now top up before you do business with it. So we are at a place where we cannot pretend that things are good. But can we also stop making these morning shows feel like the Book of Lamentations? We cannot, you look at our social media and it feels like a congregation of mourners. You do morning shows and it also looks like, okay, people are wailing. As in, how do you inspire hope even in the children we're talking about? Are we able also to look at the positive things they've been able to do?
What are the positive
And like I have actually said, there is a list I will read you of so many things they've done. But at the moment, today, for example, let's just start with Unga. I come from the Far West, and we people in the Far West do very good work when it comes to flour. Today, a packet of flour is about 153 to 158. But in my village in Matungu, for example, we do 90, 80, 70 because tunasiaga kwa kisiagi. And 70% of Kenyans, by the way, people who do ugali, 70% of them don't buy packet. I'm just starting from there, the very light end of it. We've actually moved money from subsidizing consumption to doing production. And by the way, when they were talking about the bottom-up economics model, whatever they were promising, if you look at it, it's a radical way of doing things. If they ever told us, and I've not seen anywhere that Kenya Kwanza told us that it was going to be easy to shift things from left to right, and it works so easily. So I know that when the president shows up tomorrow, he'll actually do two things. He will try to talk about the things he's done, and I've told you I've got a list of about 50 here. And he will also, I hope he will be magnanimous enough to also acknowledge that there are misses that have been there. And that happens. Tyson said that everybody has got a plan until you hit the first punch. So William Ruto might have been the deputy president, but I doubt he was the president before. No one interns for this job. So now that he's actually on the seat, you realize that he has nowhere else to pass the buck. It stops with him.
It's too much hope being sold. Every single day we're being told things are going to get better. Give us 2 weeks. Give us 2 months. Remember when the dollar was at 120?
Yes.
Or at 150 and the president said, we're going to bring it down to 120 in the next 3 months. Where is it now?
And the dollar
155 and climbing.
Is it really entirely hope that the administration has been selling? No, this morning we are discussing, we've not looked at the plan. The plan is not hope. Those are deliberate policy actions and interventions they actually are promising. The way we are looking at it, there is very little room to wriggle out of where we are already. And like I said earlier on, anyone, and if you look at newspapers last year, the previous year, they actually were saying that whoever would become the fifth president, the fifth watch was going to become very difficult because we weren't so prudent with using our debt book in the last 10 years. So it's okay. And Kenyans must also know one thing, that you cannot eat your cake and have it. Like, for example, our democracy is very noisy. That whereas we have got a robust democracy, there's a way it affects our neighbors, and that is, we will not force our way of life on them, just like they can't force their way of life on us. So a lot of what is happening in the region is not really something that we will say we can control. So the dollar, for example, and I'll put this challenge back to you, Jeff, and you guys in the media. That you see, it's only in God that we should trust. Everybody else should bring data, including those of us who come here. So when the president comes up and tells you that he will bring the dollar down to 120, no one asked for the dollar for data to support that. The only person you trust blindly would be God. But the rest, everybody else, Nurdin here, Nick, everyone else, if anyone tells you anything, they should bring data to support that.
So why say it if they're selling BS, if you will? I mean, that's what it is at the end of the day. Because whatever happened to bottom up? Let's start there. Bottom up became up bottom.
I still hold it that whereas things are difficult, Kenya Kwanza's biggest problem that they really need to sort is their communication function. Because I'll go back to the statement we started with. When the CS Energy says that, I read somewhere in an international paper that if this war in Israel and Hamas persists, then the international prices of oil would actually go high of up to $150 per barrel. And that therefore means that we could end up with fuel being at 300. Do you know what we do? You guys in the media, and Jeff, you've been there for a very long time. Nick is one of those voices I've heard forever. You know this for sure. There's something called context. Context is this pretext, the text, and then post-text. If you look at the entire of that statement, the CS did not say
that it
will go. He said that he read an article that said that if the war continued, then the international prices could go up. And because we know the matrix that actually we use to calculate the price of fuel, he says that if Look at here. This is a conditional if. If that's, he said, if that article were to be looked at, then it means that local fuel will go up to 300. What did the media do? It picked up one line. And what did the government do? They did not even care to actually respond back, clarify, or put it in context.
Because the price of oil has actually gone down to 80 or 89.
Yes, so he was actually explaining. So the context within which he said that. So he did bad communication. The media ran with it. They have not cared. Just see how many people have actually gotten into a place of despair because a man was explaining what he read and he was giving how it would look like. He didn't say it will. He said it could, based on the scenario he cited. But that is the news that has actually driven the last 2 days. Yeah. And they have not even cared to actually come out. You see, first of all, the communications people in that particular ministry should have done better to prep the CS. That wasn't done. So I will still insist that whereas things are not rosy, we cannot sit here and pretend that everything is okay. But again, we should also actually point out that it's not as bad as it's being painted. Because if you are our neighbor and you looked into Kenya, you will think that this country is burning. Only to come in and realize that we are having a very good conversation.
What are the priorities of the government that is in place? You asked something about bottom up. You see, there's a joke that I joke with my friends sometimes. I tell them, you see, this government was built on social issues. And so those who are at the bottom, for example, which is ground floor, are now at basement 1. And who knows whether they get to basement 2 or 3. Why do I say this? Because you look at, for example, the priority list that the government has. So many promises were made, and that's why they are suffering. Because actualizing them, most of them were just promises that were never meant to be actualized. And since they know they can't be realized, the best thing to do is to be honest about it, but they can't because they keep making more promises every other new day. So you end up forgetting what they said because every new day there's a new promise. And now the problem is, like you rightfully said, is the communication. Back then the communication was campaign-ended communication. Now the campaigns are over, but there are those who are still on campaign mode. So you ask yourself, what vacancy do we have? Because all the seats we know have people who are occupying them. So you need to move on, pick up your manifesto. It's like it got lost somewhere. So they have to look for it, number one. Number two, there are those people who voted for this government because they had hope in it. Now, when you say a government is there to sell hope, now after selling hope, what happens? If you don't actualize the same hope, then I end up in despair. Look at the shambles in our education right now. Today, it's this form. The next day, they wake up and say, you know what, we won't use this form that you are going to use. We are coming up with something new. It's an entire confused system. So you ask yourself, those people who are in place, do most of them know what they're doing? That's the question. The answer is no. Now, if the answer is no, then who's the appointing authority? Because, you see, the other day when you was reading the Riot Act for the cabinet ministers, the cabinet secretaries, I laughed because at the end of the day, you're appointing authority. You can't come out and criticize them and then give them new performance contracts. So the question is, did they achieve the requirements under the old performance contracts? The answer is no. So why renew them? You get? Yeah. So it starts from him. There's something they used to say when Uhuru was president. The buck stops from Uhuru. Now he's president at the end of the day. And this heat will only get worse because life is getting tough. People are losing livelihoods. Companies are shutting down. Businesses are getting hard because of taxes here and there. So even if we say, because they tell us, you know what, lazima mkaze mshipi. But how umetoa belt? The largesse, the extravagance. It's new vehicles every other day. It's the travels, obscene travels, crazy amounts that are being used in travels. And nobody tells us how much is being used. Now, I'll ask you a simple question because I have seen the scatters of the photos they post. We do have an airline, for example. That is KQ, right? So tell me why government officials use Fly Emirates. Tell me why.
It's cheaper.
No, listen. At the end of the day, it's cheaper, right?
Yes.
Why can't you negotiate cheaper rates to KQ?
Not even that, just make KQ be...
Make it better. That's my question, because if KQ...
patriotism after
exactly,
all.
At the cost of...
No, wait, because at the end of the day, you're landing somewhere with a foreign airline, and you're meant to be an ambassador of your own country. You look at how that's so weird. Because at the end of the day, if KQ is suffering, we're the ones who are meant to... One, like you rightfully said, patriotism, that's one. Number two, we're supposed to help it, all right? So, and Parliament is dead, because these things need to be asked. Because we don't have a Parliament. Nobody is checking. There are no checks. There are no checks and balances. Right now, we are preoccupied, for example, with impeachment that is at the Senate. Yesterday I was following that impeachment, and I could laugh, because you look at the things that, the priorities that we have, or leaders have. The other day in Bomet, they had a problem with the CCM who has beards. So you look at the priority list of those people who elect into office, and you laugh.
We are a reflection of the people we voted.
Exactly. So you see, they're like, we want to impeach this guy because he doesn't comb his beard.
So it's Jeff and who would maintain their job.
So Nick and I would lose, at the end of the day. So, they say, if you elect a clown, expect a circus. So we have a circus every 5 years. Yesterday, I was following Parliament as well. There's a new discussion on how apparently we have too many holidays. Now, there's a holiday on Monday, all right? We don't know if that is a way of making that day a holiday. Now, we have the leader of majority in the House saying how he wants, in his brilliant idea, one of the things that Kenyans are ailing from, too many holidays, they want to scrap off Tamaduni Day. Priority list again. So they have to wake up and realize, one, they're in government. For those who haven't believed that they won, it's 1 year down the line. And you don't have an election between now and then, because unless you have an act of God. All right? So people need to wake up, stop the campaign-ended communication. Number two, if, for example, you realize there are issues in appointments that you made and people are lagging behind in their duties and don't even know what they're doing, you just have to do what you have to do.
And the other thing, Arnold, is you saw the government's economic advisor saying that the economy is in good shape. What was that?
Yeah, it's on the right track.
It's on the right track. I mean, where? You can't, tell that to Mama Mboga. Tell that to the border guy.
Tell it to the people who actually have to go to the supermarket, and 1,000 bob is now, in fact, at the petrol station.
Yeah.
1,000 is of no use.
When David Ndii actually tells you that the economy is actually on the right track, you actually have to believe him, because David Ndii does not know how to actually hide light in darkness or darkness in light. So this is what I'm actually trying to say. All of us knew that things were not good, at least if we were honest people, when we saw the new revenue measures that were being put in place. No politician in his right sense, we know that all politicians are populist, and therefore William Ruto is no exception. He is not going to hurt the people just to ensure that, as in, William cannot actually hurt people for sport. If he's taking a measure that is uncomfortable, knowing too well that William Ruto will really want to please all of us so that he gets a second term, then you know there is definitely something he's responding to. So when those unpopular quote-unquote measures were actually being brought in, it was speaking to a situation that we are in. We just weren't bold enough to actually come out and say, by the time somebody who should be bringing me ice cream is bringing me a piece of cassava, something somewhere is not correct. So this is the plan they wanted to do. Once you go, and the president does not have more than 3,000 jobs once he comes to power. What you are replacing at the top, including parastatal boards, it's not more than 3,000. The entirety of what we have, about 900,000 people that work in government, are the same. The treasury mandarins and the people who work there are the same. So once you come in, you are told this is where we are. You are then faced with reality. Nick, if you will allow me, I'll give you a story in 2 minutes. Once upon a time, I was elected in Nairobi as the Nairobi representative to the National Youth Council. We went to State House because the act had been passed. We were young people, elected by young people, and we were roju kweli kweli. So we were like, the law was passed, we are supposed to be given money from Treasury and everything else. So we went to see President Uhuru Kenyatta in 2014 and told him we won elections fairly, of course, just like him, and young people expect of us to deliver everything. Then while we were seated there, he told us, of course, I was reading the requirement, everything for the group. He told me, okay, he brought in the CS for finance then, Rotich. Our CS then was Anne Waiguru. He brought in Murkomen. Tava Msimi then was the chair budget, and so many other people. So while we were there, he told them, you give these people 300 million shillings, telling Rotich while we were seated there. Ensure they get 300 million shillings so that they can actually run the National Youth Council effectively. Then we were working a whole year in office, zero budget. And the young people were almost lynching us. We also had made promises. So after that, the controller of budget, then I can't remember, a Harvard-trained guy who was sitting in as in acting capacity. So we told him the president had said this, and we went there sounding very eloquently. So he told me, you look like you have got a good head. I would like you to work with me in the afternoon, tomorrow. Are you available? I said, yes. So I went in and he told me, you are the size of my son. So I'll work with you in this office. He told me these things normally people are not given around here, but I'll give you access. Because I hope probably one day you're going to actually be in government and you will understand how it works. Then he told me, bring that file. There was a CS, I'll not name man, who was asking for 1.8 billion shillings for a different project. Then there was that, and then there was that. In the evening, he told me, you know the kind of magic I do around here? I have to balance things. He told me, you know, when I left, he told me, did the president, have you read the Constitution? As much as I have got legal knowledge, I had even forgotten that a presidential declaration must actually be in writing and it should have a seal. So even when President Uhuru was telling us, before those guys, that Mwende Mupatiwe 300 million,
he knew
very well. But then I looked at the situation at the controller of budget, the back room, and then I realized that it's so difficult. He told me that first of all, once he gets money, he must ensure that there are things that are primary. Our airspace must be safe. And he told me, young people like you are in Somalia fighting to defend this country. I must ensure that they have got fuel, they have got bullets. At that particular time, we were funding it directly. We have got children that we have to immunize. When people go to those facilities, it's free of charge, yes, for the majority, unless people like Nick who can actually afford private health. For the rest of the country, the 89% of them, he says, but they have got an agreement. Government has to pay. So by the time he gets to balance these things, it's too difficult. So we are at a place where sometimes government communication lets us down. And politicians, as usual, will, of course, campaign in prose. I will not make it the other way around. They campaign in prose. They are very detailed. They give you everything there is. But immediately they get to the office, they start doing poetry. And you know, poetry can be very difficult to actually sometimes understand. So that is where we are.
Other week you wake up, this is being taxed. There's a new tax being introduced. There's this housing levy, which became a tax as well. I mean, come on, man. When is this going to end?
You see, the sad reality is that citizens don't have control in whatever is happening, because the government has an agenda, and it has to achieve its agenda. Now, in achieving your agenda, there's one thing we forget. You have to be people-centric, because you have to also care about that person who you're taxing. You know, to tax the tax, because everything now is going up. You rightfully said about the 1,000 shillings. Everything is going up except income. There are those people who right now don't have jobs. That means, and you know the issue about the education sector right now, so some are fearing they'll be unable to take the children to school. There are issues of medication. So the question is, this all goes back to what I was saying earlier. Where are your members of parliament? Because they are meant to be a representative. If you're being taxed to oblivion, they are the ones who are supposed to put a barrier. You get? But they are not there. And that is because of this thing that we experienced in Jubilee, tyranny of numbers. So UD has numbers. So whatever the agenda they might have, there is no single day the majority leader will let it down. So at the end of the day, it begs the question, when do you differentiate between the party position and those who elected you? When does your brain kick in and when does it start to work? Because we have instances where members of parliament don't even show up for the house sessions. They only come to vote. And when they come to vote, they're like, how are we voting? We've had a senior member of parliament telling us how people take soup to vote. We've heard how he's an enabler to corruption. So is that the house that we are waiting for as Kenyans to represent, oversight, and legislate? So if you're a whip and you're an enabler to corruption, is that what you're whipping? Is soup taking or soup giving what you're whipping? So it begs the question. It goes back to you, the voter. Because you cannot vote for, let's say, for example, let me give an analogy. You cannot vote for a thief and expect when they go home, when they get to the office, they guard your property. So you also have to draw a line and realize that you also have, in as much as we blame the leadership, we also need to look at ourselves. And that is, if you can't do that, then it means you'll be electing the same people who give you a packet of flour. I don't know how much a packet of flour you'll eat for 5 years. Will give 500 shillings. I don't know if you're going to eat 100 shillings a year. So that you also have to raise the occasion and realize, for Chapter 6 of the Constitution to actually work, the citizens really need to take initiative. Because it talks about leadership and integrity. You always have two types of leaders. One who wants to come, buy your vote, go in, and realizes that I bought my vote in, I have to recoup whatever I made, whatever I used, sorry. And then you have a leader who's out there, and all will know this sometimes, there are leaders who are campaigning, who have great ideas, but because they don't have money, they can never go anywhere.
By the way, so, Arnold was saying in Western, unga is 90 bob.
They're only eating unga.
constitution we gave ourselves is not perfect. There's not going to be a constitution that is perfect. We brought in checks and balances because we didn't like the imperial presidency then, and thought that if we put a lot of power in parliament, that a group of so many people cannot agree in one accord, of course, to betray the nation. I think a little bit on that, we then did think of the effect of the CDF. Because CDF was for us a pilot project for devolution. Now, I'll tell you 100%, and I've done a paper on that. There is a direct correlation between the death of parliament for what it is and CDF. So you're going to have members of parliament who tell you, kwenda kusema kizungu mingi parliament sitafanya, watu wangu hawalalamiki. So offending, of course, the principle of separation of powers, but effectively killing oversight. Have you seen that do you know that there's no one who has ever been jailed for actually misusing CDF? Hizo zingine zote we can complain that there's not so much serious action on corruption, but at least we know people have gone to jail. No one up to now has actually ever gone to jail for misusing CDF. Because the same people that are giving are the people who are actually auditing themselves. If we really want to give Parliament the power it's supposed to have, because Parliament for me has got 4 functions: to represent the people, to do legislation, to do oversight, and there is a very important part that we don't talk about very loudly: budget making. This Parliament that we have, the post-2010 Parliament, is a budget-making body and is not a late endorser like it used to be in the days of old to the budget-making process. You meet these guys here making a lot of noise. They have no idea about the budget, yet the budget has been in Parliament 3 times before it comes out here. You look at the papers that are coming out from the Parliamentary Budget Office, very detailed and very good papers. MPs and people who spend a lot of time there do have no idea about it. So if you really want oversight to work in this country, let us actually just be bold. Do away with CDF. If we don't remove CDF, we will not have Parliament, because what we have are CDF managers, not members of Parliament. Even the rating that was on the papers the other day, those are not best members of Parliament. Those are good CDF managers. That is not why we go to Parliament. That's not why we go to the ballot to elect members of Parliament. But no one is going to be bold that way, because the African thinking of leadership is that you must be benevolent. You must bring something. That's why every leader that has got a budget always ranks higher. If you don't have a budget, that's why women rep did not perform very well. People who are busy doing parliamentary functions did not do well. But then I need to actually say something that is very controversial. I think Chapter 6 should be expunged from the Constitution.
What?
It should be removed from the Constitution.
Ethics.
Yes.
And leadership.
Yes. Do you know why? We are not ready for it as a people. We cannot have a Constitution, put in a provision, and every time we try to, let me just say how my people would say, we beat corners around it. We are not ready to actually have what we put in there. So tusiweke Chapter 6 Constitution kama decoration, kama hatutaki tuitoe. Because there are a lot of jokes about this thing. Look at the laws that we keep on passing around that. And, you know...
And the people we keep electing.
When you talk about ethics, when you talk about culture, it's about the people themselves. See how the people elect. And that is the culture they endorse. So why are we trying to force on ourselves a culture that we're not ready to live by? So this Chapter 6 business, no wonder you realize it's not. The good thing is that Kenya Kwanza never campaigned on the platform for corruption or Chapter 6 or anything else. But the truth is that I think as a country we need to review. When I talk about it being removed, it's because we really need to rethink it. Why did we bring it in?
This is the problem with our elections of voting. It has been commercialized. And that's why I told you, if you don't have money, you can't be elected. You know, it's as simple as you and I, let's say we're going after the same seat. You call a town hall and you give them money. I come, I don't have money, I talk, and then as I'm going, utaniuliza unatuacha aje. And because I'm as a cabbage. So if I don't give them the cabbage, they won't come for my next meeting. And that in itself is the commercialization in politics. And it is by design, so that a certain caliber of people are always in office. And those people never have the interest of the nation at heart. It's how they're going to make a killing, how they'll move from an LC200 to a G-Wagon, from a G-Wagon to a Lamborghini Urus, from a Lamborghini to a Maserati. They could care less how the citizens would live. At the end of the day, you look at the situation we have, I believe Chapter 6 is very vital, because we have to have integrity at the end of the day.
All right. The state of the nation for me is strong and it's resilient. That doesn't mean that things are rosy, but I also know, out of looking at data, that we could actually be in a bad situation. I've seen papers 3 years ago that were actually projecting that we would actually be in default by this year. We've not gone into default. I have seen a reduction in competitiveness. Income is actually going lower, but there are other things that actually have worked. I'll tell you. For the longest time, since 1992, the informal sector overtook the formal sector as the job creator of note. Therefore, about 3.5 million people have been the people who've been shouldering taxes. Yet I'll tell you, I was born and grew up in Mathare, and I'll tell you this free of charge, that kuna masonko huko chini kwa hiyo informal sector, and because it's informal sector, somehow we've made it so difficult to tax those people. A number of the noises people are making is just trying to make revenues being equitable to everybody else, because government is only going to tax you on three things. First of all, on income. They have no other option. They will tax you on income, they will tax you on expenditure, and they'll tax you on wealth. Wealth taxes in this particular country don't really work very well. So it's not one of those. So it's either at the point where you get money or when you're spending. So that has been worked out so that we all share the burden equitably. But no one loves to actually pay taxes. At the end of the day, I need to remind Kenyans that a good citizen has got three characteristics. Number one, a good citizen must either be at work or in school preparing capacity to work for the nation. Number two, a good citizen must pay their taxes. All of us are now doing that, at least a majority of us. They might be going down. And by the way, you realize that even with those robust measures, the revenue is still going down. Forget hiyo kizungu mingi ya sijui Laffer curve and everything else that we were doing in economics class. I'll tell you the truth that by the time these tighter measures were coming in, already projections had shown that we were going down and we were trying to show up a sinking vessel. Number three, every good citizen serves community. So resilience has actually defined us as a people. Do not buy these morning lamentations. Do not buy these headlines. Of course, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday are thin news days. So normally, watu wa magazeti try to actually blow out stuff. It's tough, yes, but we are resilient. We are made of harder stuff. And as a nation, we have nothing under our soil.
There are a lot of hits and misses, and more focus should be given on A, their manifesto, and then two, they see the economy, as it rightfully says, we are not in a good place. And for it to get any better, more policies and more advances towards stabilizing it are needed, as opposed to what we're seeing, because yes, we are seeing already instances of misappropriation of funds. We're seeing issues of less priorities on what is needed. So I do believe, I'm not one I'm not a pessimist. Plus I believe it's our government, and if it succeeds, we succeed. If it fails, we fail. And no one would want its government to fail. But when the government is not doing what it's supposed to do, we should always be responsible enough and tell it as it is. And I believe my brother here, in as much as he is supporting government, he has a brain and would understand where issues are there, we raise them. So for me, I believe extra focus is needed. One, we need a clarity on our education, because parents, as it is, some don't even understand how January is going to be. There are issues where members of parliament had with the Minister for Education, for example, they were saying how they're trying to pass legislation and they're not parliament. So we have instances where, yes, he said communication was a problem, but I believe the government also needs to have its priorities in order so that we can actually achieve a situation where the citizens feel like you're working towards making their lives better.
Yeah.